This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Oh yeah, look at my life, hey now, yeah. Oh yeah, look at my life out here on the road. Oh yeah, look at my life, hey now, yeah. Oh yeah, look at my life out here on the road.
Hey now.
Hey now.
Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of Scott Fox After 9. I haven't officially returned yet. These are bonus episodes that I'm doing because there's so much going on in the world right now, and there's a lot of people who are confused. There's a lot of people struggling to understand why all of this trade war stuff is happening, and what I'm trying to do here on the pod, especially with these episodes, there's no set length on these ones. I'm just trying to give you the information that you're not getting from the mainstream media. I think you need to hear from all sides. I think you need to hear from our leaders. I think we need to talk about what's happening right now. So in this episode, you're going to hear a lot. You're going to hear the American side. You're going to hear Doug Ford speaking in this episode, and he had some very pointed remarks for Donald Trump yesterday. As I record, I can tell you that those remarks are not sitting well with President Trump. President Trump yesterday tweeted invoking the name of the late, great Rob Ford to get under Doug Ford's skin. And this morning, just breaking, Donald Trump has tweeted that America is considering renaming Lake Ontario Lake America. He says he doesn't see America doing much business with Ontario in the future. That is scary news, because what I think that everybody needs to remember, everybody cheering on this trade war, I think you need to remember the estimate so far, if nothing changes, 90,000 lost Canadian jobs, and a lot of them are going to be in Ontario. 90,000 lost jobs, and that number could skyrocket. Yesterday, I'm going to give some credit to a fellow broadcaster. Greg Brady does the morning show on AM 640 in Toronto. He claims he's got a well-placed source that won't go on the record, but a well-placed source that's high up in the auto industry that says we won't be making cars in Ontario by 2029. It'll just be a memory by then. That's going to be devastating for the economy. I maintain we've got to solve this problem, and we've got to work out a deal. That was supposed to be job one for Mark Carney. He was elected because he said he knew Donald Trump. He said he knew how to deal with Donald Trump, and he said he was the one to get a deal with Donald Trump. We had a deal. That deal appeared to be a good deal. And then Mark Carney walked away at the last minute. Why did he do that? Well, let's not forget there are some important by-elections coming up in the next few days. Let's also keep in mind the timeline. And that's exactly where I'm going to start on this episode. Let's go back to midweek last week. President Donald Trump speaking to the media. It looked like we had a deal.
Mr. President, today's about American production. Can you give us any update on your negotiations with Canada for a trade deal?
Yeah, we had a very good conversation with the Prime Minister last night, and we've come to a deal with Canada. As you know, the 50% tariffs across the board were going on against Canada today, and they called yesterday and they gave us the points that we had to have. Very fair deal for both. The tariffs will be non-existent for our farmers. Our farmers were paying tremendous tariffs into Canada, and those tariffs are going to be totally eviscerated, down to zero.
Is the U.S. going to lower tariffs on Canadian autos or lumber?
We're doing certain things. Got to give something, and we're doing certain things. They were paying a high number. We're reducing it a little bit. It's good for everybody. But our farmers are going to be thrilled. Our manufacturers are going to be thrilled. And basically, we have no tariffs going into Canada anymore. Canada was charging us tremendous tariffs. We no longer have any tariffs. And what I was able to do is we put, as you know, under the new tariff, I guess you'd call it the new tariff schedules that we came out with. They were going to get a 50% tariff on everything starting today. And we've held it back 3 days. It's all subject to finalization of documents. So subject to the finalization of documents, we have a deal with Canada, and I think it's a very good deal for both parties. It's great for our farmers. Our farmers will no longer be held up because they were being hurt very badly by Canada. Yeah.
That was President Trump last week. He said he had spoken to Mark Carney the night before and they had a deal. Just had to go through some paperwork, but otherwise they had a deal. Then Mark Carney got on the phone with the premiers. He asked them to please put U.S. alcohol back on the shelves, and the premiers went nuts. There are some premiers in this country that politically benefit greatly from this war with Donald Trump, not the least of which is Doug Ford. He got reelected with a third straight majority government on a promise to protect Ontario and stand up for Ontario workers, stand up to Donald Trump. Well, Doug Ford has a very different communication style. I'm sure everybody knows that. Donald Trump also has a very different communication style. Can those two communication styles gel? It doesn't seem that way. And frankly, what I'm worried about right now is that we're dealing emotionally in a situation where we should be thinking logically. We have got way too many people that are way too amped up right now. And frankly, there's too many jobs on the line for us to allow this to continue. Yesterday, Premier Ford aggressively went after President Trump. And some people are going to say this is great. Some people are going to feel the cringe. Some people are going to be angry at how Doug Ford spoke yesterday about the president. Listen to this.
I don't respond to a dictator like President Trump, a bully like President Trump. He's the type of guy in school that would take your lunch money one day, take your toque off your head the next day, and then steal your running shoes. I'm not going to take any advice off a guy that's the king of bankruptcies. You know, your own people, President Trump, don't even like you. And they're going to speak loud and clear when it comes to the midterms. And if I was allowed to, I'd be down there door knocking. I've dealt with guys like you my whole life. And guess what? You all become losers because you're a loser. I have more courage, more brains in my baby toe than he has in his whole body. I've been in this game a lot longer than he has. I got skin on me like an alligator. And you think an insult from him hurts me? Well, bring it on, buddy. I'm ready. Bring it on. I have a lot of real estate on my ass, so he has a lot of room to kiss my ass.
Wow. I've been through some pretty intense negotiations in my lifetime. I've never heard people across the table speak like that. He called him a loser. And by the way, it doesn't matter if you agree with what Doug Ford is saying. Doug Ford is supposed to be a senior Canadian government official. Calling him a loser, calling him out for bankruptcies, saying he has no integrity, telling him to kiss his ass. That is probably, in my estimation, not the most smart way to deal with Donald Trump. That was a montage of all of the different insults that Doug Ford threw at Donald Trump yesterday. And I can only think that either Doug Ford is completely incapable of managing his own emotions, or he is trying to ramp this up to a level that I don't know if we'll be able to walk it back. 90,000 jobs are on the line, and we're playing games like that, making comments like that. So I think that what we need to do here is A, work out a deal, but B, we've got to get the adults back in the room. And there are still a few involved in this, nearest I can tell. One of them is Dominic LeBlanc. Dominic LeBlanc is in charge of Canada-U.S. relations. Yesterday, he was on the CBC.
What happened in those intervening hours? Tell me why this deal was derailed, and maybe reveal what was so bad about it in terms of Canada's sovereignty. Speak to what was in the final text of this deal that had you concerned about the sovereignty of this country.
Yeah, so, and JP, I understand why you're asking the questions. We're not going to talk about particular versions of the text. We respect the commitments we make to the United States and to other trading partners around those kind of details. But you're right. We believed on Wednesday and Thursday that we were close to a deal that would have brought significant relief in the 232 sectoral tariffs to make Canada and Canadian businesses competitive and commercially viable by reducing those tariffs. On Friday, the Prime Minister, I think, in his comments on Saturday, used examples of the kind of things that during the day Friday suddenly appeared in the conversations or in various exchanges of documents that we thought had been resolved. So use the automobile example. We had always talked about the vehicle manufacturing sector in Canada as including medium and heavy-duty trucks. Those are the Ford F-250, F-350. They're the heavy-duty Silverado trucks that are made by GM and Ford in Canada. We obviously weren't going to accept tariff reductions on a basket of vehicles that didn't include those important production lines. We had discussed the importance of including Canadian parts in the calculation of what is the content of those vehicles. In the end, if those were not attainable, that is one example of where, in the Prime Minister's judgment, we didn't have an agreement that was in the economic interest of Canada. But you have to be careful. Steel and aluminum derivative products, another example. It's tens of billions of dollars for the Canadian economy. The tariff treatment of those products can't be any less than other trading partners. We have a big trade surplus with the United States in that area. So why would we ever accept to agree to a tariff structure that was not commercially viable for them? Those are two examples. You asked about sovereignty. The Americans started discussing at the end Canada's ability to enter into other free trade agreements with other trading partners, a key priority of Mr. Carney and the Canadian government, something we've done a lot of work on, made very considerable progress over the last number of months. So the idea that the United States would have a word to say in the sovereign decision of Canada to enter into a free trade agreement with another reliable trading partner obviously wasn't something that we were prepared to consider. So it was the cumulative total of a series of things that, as I say, started showing up in the conversations at the end that made the Prime Minister conclude, and properly so, that we didn't have in front of us an agreement that was in the economic interest of the whole country.
Dominic LeBlanc yesterday speaking to the CBC. He didn't really give specific examples. That's still very broad. And one of the things that a lot of people are calling for, including people on the left, is we got to see the deal. Canadians have been dragged through this for a year and a half now. We were told that if we elect Mark Carney, he can solve this problem for us. And then he walked away at the last minute. So you just heard the liberal side of the story, why we walked away. But I still want to know, what was it we walked away for? Dominic LeBlanc said it was an accumulation of different issues right at the last minute. Why do we walk away from the table at that point? Why don't we say, okay, you know what? Clearly, we still have more stuff to work out here. You extend your deadline for these 50% new tariffs while we're still talking. And I have a feeling the Americans absolutely would have gone for that. No, we didn't do that. We weren't interested in negotiating anymore. We ended the negotiation. We blew it up. We walked away. We recalled our negotiators from Washington back to Ottawa. We did all of that. And it sounds like there wasn't any one specific issue. It was just a couple of little issues that all added up. To me, that's a solvable problem when 90,000 people are about to lose their job. But our government decided they didn't want to do it that way. The question is, did they decide that for political reasons with a by-election coming up or several by-elections? Or did they do that because they just don't have anything else that they can give? I think that there is always room for negotiation. Like I said yesterday, it's a famous quote, war. And yes, we are in a trade war. Those were Prime Minister Carney's words. War is the failure of diplomacy. Did we really do everything we could to get a deal? Or is it just too politically convenient to have a fight going with Donald Trump so the Canadian people are fixated on Donald Trump and not thinking about all of the issues that we have here in Canada? And keep in mind, the vast majority of the economic, immigration, crime, and what have you issues that we have in Canada that really bug the regular Canadian people have nothing to do with Donald Trump. That was a failure of our own government. You have already heard Canada side. You just heard Dominic LeBlanc. Now let's hear from the Americans. Yesterday, a number of senior American government officials were out talking. Let's go to U.S. Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent.
The United States and President Trump still want Canada to become a state. He did say that they're getting all the benefits of being a state without being one.
I think he would like Canada to come to the table and negotiate in good faith. They were offered quite a good deal last week. They chose to reject it. Unfortunately, Prime Minister Carney rose to power on an anti-American, anti-Trump platform. I believe is more than 20 points behind, and he seems to have gone back to his old playbook. And I think one has to ask oneself: is he trying to benefit himself, the Liberal Party, or the Canadian people? Because they were offered a very good job. So
now even the American government officials are calling it out. Seems like he walked away for political reasons because they had a deal. They had it. If Prime Minister Carney, and I believe this, if he had not had that call with the premiers, I believe that was on Thursday, he would have signed the deal that Donald Trump had in front of him. Carney was absolutely ready to sign it. That's why he went to the premiers. Hey, we've got a deal, but I need you to put U.S. alcohol back on the shelves. They didn't want to do it because there's certain premiers in this country that are really benefiting from this trade war. Premiers that probably wouldn't have a shot at getting reelected if they didn't have Donald Trump to blame everything on. And by the way, if you don't like Donald Trump, no problem at all. I don't want you to mistake this commentary for me defending Donald Trump. Not in any way am I doing that. I agree that if it was a bad deal that we were being stuck with, we should have walked away. But we have a right to know what that deal was. What did we walk away from? What was so bad in that deal that 50% matching dollar for dollar tariffs was the better alternative? What was so bad about that? This prime minister has made no bones about the fact that he really wants us closer to Europe. Just yesterday, as all of this was breaking, sure enough, the CBC opened up applications for Canada's entry for Eurovision. Yeah, Carney signed us up for that too. I'm really deeply concerned about what's about to happen here in Canada, and I think every middle-class Canadian should, whether you are on the left or on the right. It doesn't matter. There will be no discrimination whatsoever. Jobs are going to get lost. Lives are going to be ruined. Families are going to be destroyed. People will lose their home. Lines at food banks are about to get longer. All of this is coming, and that's a failure of our government to negotiate a deal.
More. I don't know if it was political for them. It certainly doesn't make economic sense, but perhaps for political reasons. They have some by-elections coming up. I don't know, but they came in and they wanted more, and we weren't prepared to do that.
That was U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer yesterday on CNBC. He's saying it's political too. He's saying Carney walked away for political reasons. Think about this for just a second. This is what the reality for Mark Carney was on Friday morning before he blew up the deal on Friday night. The premiers had told him they will turn on him if he accepts this deal. He would have had liberal boomers ready to eat him alive if he agreed to any deal that had any tariffs. He had no choice but to walk away, or his political career was over. And the Canadian people be damned. Forget the middle class. He needs to save his political career and save his political agenda. Let's hear a little bit more from Jamieson Greer speaking again yesterday to CNBC.
You may or may not agree with this, but I wanted to get your side of the story. The report says that, quote, the negotiations also exposed friction between Greer and U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick's respective public policy spheres. While the White House has been adamant officials are in lockstep, two people familiar with the talk said that Lutnick felt that the deal framework hammered out by Greer's trade office was, quote, sprung on his agency despite involving a number of policy issues he oversees. What do you think?
Well, Politico is a little garbage in, garbage out, as I think a lot of us know. Howard and I talk together every day. We work together every day, and we only act at the direction of the president. So there's not really a lot of freelancing going on. And Howard's agency, the Department of Commerce, they have authority over Section 232. So Howard and I met together with the Canadians on these issues. When there were some of these last-minute issues, again, we talked. So this is something where I don't have the time or energy or patience to have a different view than my cabinet colleagues or the president. So we work together really, really closely on that. I understand it could be frustrating for Canadians that we have tariff authorities in two different agencies, but that's how Congress set it up, and so we work together. And importantly, we do what the president says. So I think that's a little bit of a red herring. The reality is, for a long time, we told the Canadians, here are some things where we think we can deliver you the best deal in the world. Well, you'll have preferential access over every other country into the United States, and you will be the most preferred partner. And they said, well, we actually need a better situation than that, and walked away.
So you can't tell us when this comes around. Does the president view the trade deficit with Canada differently than other nations? Jamieson, it's also pointed out almost all of that is oil, which we want to import oil from Canada, heavy crude, which we can handle down here. So without that, there would be a trade surplus. This isn't one of the instances where just because there's a deficit, the president wants to do tariffs.
Well, the deficit does matter. In some ways, Joe, that's a little bit of an accounting gimmick. You could just as easily say, we're happy to have the oil because we get it at a discount, but why should we be importing, cars and all these other things at the time? So it just depends. You can kind of pick your product and say, but for that, we wouldn't have a deficit. In this instance, people are picking oil because it's convenient. And I agree. We do want to get that oil. We have minerals. We have natural resources in Canada we want to have. Again, we offered a partnership to the Canadians, really economic and security partnership, where if everyone's protecting their market in an equal kind of way, the United States is in a better position to modify tariffs in some ways. But that was an area where the Canadians declined, or we had a difference of view.
You speak French?
I do speak French. I do.
So you don't care whether they change some of the language up there, whether they make it.
No, I mean that was a funny fake story, and I don't think that. I mean that I speak French. Two of my kids speak French. One of my kids was born in Paris, so I like the Québécois, and I like that they speak French. What we don't like is a situation where Canada, the federal government, forces American tech companies to take their earnings and give a percentage to their competitors in Canada. But I understand why the Québécois want to have French language content and all of that, and we think that's a really valuable thing, and we encourage countries to really, put their own country first and put their national identity first. That's actually quite consistent with.
So what is that? So what is that about then, Ambassador? There was some reference to the idea that we wanted some of it to be either in English, or that English had to be first, or something like that. True? Not true?
That is not true. I can tell you that's not true.
Okay, very different stories coming from the U.S. side and coming from the Canadian side, and we have no way of verifying because our side will not release the details of why we walked away and what the issue was. Seems like the Canadian people have been lied to. Seems like we're being spun. And it feels like our government officials don't really care about protecting jobs. They care about protecting their own job. That's the way all of this seems and feels right now. That again, Jamieson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, yesterday speaking on CNBC. We're in a situation now that it has got the potential to really spiral out of control. Doug Ford wanted to get under Donald Trump's skin. Mission accomplished. When Donald Trump is tweeting and mentioning Doug Ford by name. When Donald Trump is threatening to rename Lake Ontario Lake America. It's getting to a level that I don't think Mark Carney can control anymore. If Mark Carney pulled out of this deal because politically it was suicide for him, he was going to hear it from his liberal base, and he was going to hear it from the premiers who want the fight with Donald Trump. Now I don't know that he can control Doug Ford. I don't know that he can control the premiers because they're going rogue. They're saying all kinds of stuff that is intended to try and invoke a reaction out of Donald Trump. And I don't think that poking the bear is necessarily the smartest move when the deal needs to get done. I also want to remind everyone of something very, very important and something that I think should be top of mind for everyone. Last year, Canada had a choice between Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney. Mark Carney swore he had the resume, he had the knowledge, he had the swagger, he had the skill, he had the ability, the desire to get a deal done with Donald Trump. He said he was the only one who could do it. Have we really considered what the Americans would be saying about Canada right now if we had done things differently here in Canada and elected Pierre Poilievre? Do you know what Pierre Poilievre's strategy was for negotiating with the Americans? He wanted to offer them energy security. Doug Ford may have gone completely off his rocker. He may be just completely out of control right now, not able to control the words that come out of his own mouth, telling Donald Trump to kiss his ass, all the other things, calling him a loser, all those things. Again, regardless of whether or not you agree with him. He said those things, and those are things that don't typically get said in a professional setting. If Pierre Poilievre had been elected and worked out the deal that Doug Ford said all along he wanted, Fortress North America, we would be in a very different spot. In fact, I think our economy would be really starting to cook right now. The deal that Pierre Poilievre wanted to offer the Americans was simple.
On the tariffs, would you support using Canadian energy or potash exports as a way to retaliate or force a deal?
Not as a way to retaliate. There's two types of leverage. There's negative leverage where you threaten something, and there's positive leverage where you can offer something to get something in return. Banning or taxing the export of Canadian resources would only kill tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Canadian jobs. And we would be tariffing ourselves in that case. That would not be a good idea. However, we can use our resources as a positive point of leverage by proposing to increase oil production and exports and building up a Canadian strategic energy and mineral reserve tailored for tariff-free partners. We say to our American friends, we've got 10 of the 12 NATO-defined minerals needed to fight a war. We've got the minerals needed to fertilize your crops. We've got the fourth biggest oil supply in the world. We can tailor our production and storage of these things for your purchase, particularly in the event of a crisis or a war, if you give us tariff-free access to your country. And that way we are using these things as an incentive to get the Americans to give us something in return. We know the Americans are very worried about having the minerals necessary to make fighter jets, to make semiconductors, to make infrared armor-piercing ammunition. They need our minerals for all of those things. We can say to them, look, we can have those in a reserve for you, and we will tailor it for the interests of our tariff-free allies. But in return, for us doing that positive act, we would like to have tariff-free aluminum, steel, autos, and lumber to your market.
We offer them more access to our critical minerals and but we do it through strategic reserves. The Americans want to take advantage of X, Y, or Z critical minerals in Canada? No problem. We've got a stockpile, and they're available to countries that we have a tariff-free relationship with. Let's build pipelines. Let's do it together. Let's send more oil down to America to be refined and sent more affordably back to Canada. There's a whole plan that Pierre Poilievre lined out. And right now, as I hear the American officials respond to Mark Carney walking away, and as I hear more about what the Americans actually wanted in a deal, frankly, I don't know why Canada made the choice it did a year ago. There was another way to do this.
Let me just frame why I said a better deal. Mr. Carney made that promise. He said, and I quote, that we will have a better deal than we had before. Well, before we had basically no tariffs on goods coming from Canada to the United States. So a better deal would at least have to start with that. We need zero tariffs on aluminum, steel, autos, lumber, and a full exemption to Buy America. Now, that's, in fairness, a lot of the things I just described are things that were agreed to by President Trump in the previous CUSMA agreement and or achieved by earlier conservative governments like Prime Minister Harper. So Mr. Carney has set that bar for himself. We want him to keep his promise and get an even better deal for Canada than we had before. And Conservatives are willing to do anything we can to help him keep that promise.
Poilievre's plan, I have to think, would have been a lot more effective than the one we've got on the table now. Right now, there's going to be 90,000 Canadians losing their job very, very soon because we're protecting what? The ability to tax U.S. streaming giants? To preserve French on labels in parts of Canada? I don't know if that's an issue or not. There's a lot of rumors. And again, we haven't seen the deal. And if Mark Carney and Dominic LeBlanc both agree it wasn't any one issue, it was a whole bunch of little issues, I think we can solve little issues, no problem. Do it one by one. And if we need to extend the negotiation deadline by a week or 2 or 3 or even a month, let's do that. Let's work out that deal. Let's act like adults. Let's be professional. And let's work out a deal. But right now, my friends, this is spiraling way, way, way out of control. And today it's going to get worse. Today at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Prime Minister Carney is going to announce what products Canada is going to tariff. And I want to remind you again, this is part of the reason this is so bad. A tariff on America is a tax on Canada. We pay the tax when we impose a tariff. So Mark Carney's going to go 50% matching dollar for dollar tariffs with the Americans. That's a direct tax from our government on Canada. And the House of Commons isn't even sitting. It's not even sitting right now. Carney has not recalled the House. He won't show us the deal he walked away from. It's a whole trust me. And I don't know that we can, especially after he was caught red-handed, misleading and or lying to the Canadian people about the Gordie Howe Bridge deal. We need to make some progress here. That's not going to happen while we're being emotional. Everybody's got to take a step back. Everybody has got to keep calm and work toward a deal. Let's not say anything we can't take back. And frankly, I'm worried that our leaders, they're not interested in working this out. They want the fight because it's good for them politically. Here is U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance speaking yesterday.
Obviously, we're right on the border of Canada. I know there's a lot of cross-border trade and so forth between Canada and Maine. We really think over the long term, this is the sort of thing that's going to benefit the whole United States of America, including Maine. Canada has been, unfortunately, one of the main tariff violators, one of the main trade violators that we've seen anywhere in the world. Really, the only two countries that have really retaliated against the United States have been Canada and China. I think people were shocked to hear that. But unfortunately for the Canadians, they rely on our economy. They rely on Maine a lot more than Maine relies on them. And so what we're going to do is just impose some fair rules, really force the Canadians to come to the table and give Maine businesses the same treatment they give their own businesses. That's really all we're asking, is for basic fairness. And yeah, we've got to play a little hardball to get to that fairness, but that's what we're trying to do here. And over the long term, we really think it's going to be to the benefit of everybody here in Maine.
J.D. Vance kind of calling out Canada, but also suggesting that there is a path forward here. There is a way to resolve this here. And that's good. That's the kind of spirit that I want to hear. I want to hear more of, we will work this out. We will come to a deal. The question is, how long are we going to kick the can down the road? Are we only doing this until the by-elections are over? And then if Mark Carney wins them all, then we're good. Then we'll go back to the table. Is this to mislead voters? Is this to scare Canadians into getting behind our government? What is the strategy here? Because frankly, I'm worried that we don't have the brightest, most competent and sane individuals trying to negotiate on our behalf. And I'm not 100% sure of their motives. Friends, that's it for now. That's a good summary. You've heard a lot of different perspectives. You heard everything Doug Ford had to say yesterday about Donald Trump. I have filled you in on the latest from Trump in threatening to rename Lake Ontario. You have heard from Dominic LeBlanc. He is representing Canada's side. You also heard from Jamieson Greer, who's representing the American side. I think you've got a fairly good synopsis of where things stand right now. But the next step is the counter tariffs that Canada is going to impose. Those get announced today. I will be covering those on the next episode of Scott Fox After 9. That is a can't miss episode. This is the third one since I came out of the early vacation. Please feel free to share these episodes. If you know someone who's really struggling to understand what's going on, send them a link. It's real easy to do from the apps, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, what have you. Just send the podcast to somebody who might enjoy it, who might benefit from this information, who just wants to hear from the newsmakers without the spin of the mainstream media. You've got to rely on podcasts, you've got to rely on social media, and you have got to do your level best to sort through the noise and just get to the facts and form an opinion. Where we are right now is very, very simple. We had a deal. Carney blew it up. It seems like it was for political reasons. He won't clear up the ambiguity by releasing the details of what specifically we walked over. No new talks are scheduled. 90,000 people are expected to lose their job. And right now we're in a war of words between Doug Ford and Donald Trump that is spiraling out of control. We need an adult in the room. And maybe we should be going in a different direction when it comes to negotiation, because I have to think that what Pierre Poilievre put out there is something that would be a lot more agreeable for the Americans, and it would bring peace and stability back to North America. I'll catch you back here soon on the next episode. Enjoy your day.
The 2.6 million Canadians whose jobs depend on getting rid of these terrible American tariffs have had about enough of Mark Carney making false promises and delivering the worst economy in the G7.
Oh yeah, look at my life out here on the road. Oh yeah.
season is ahead, and you'll be spending way more time inside. Is your home ready? Don't worry. With Wayfair, you can upgrade your space without breaking the bank. Score up to 70% off during their Labor Day clearance on furniture, area rugs, mattresses, and more. Plus, surprise flash deals you can't miss. Whether it's one room or the whole house, Wayfair has pieces for every style and budget.
Shop Wayfair's Labor Day clearance now through September 7th at wayfair.com.
Wayfair, every style, every home.